This is the Fierce Heart Alliance, featuring the Harmonic Virtues, a self-reflective practice to understand virtues based on the laws of the universe, ancient teachings, and channeled wisdom. We can apply these virtues to everyday life to fully participate in our personal evolution by cultivating resiliency, purpose, and harmony through self-awareness and self-stewardship. Hi, I'm Summer Sophia Moon, and I've come here to heal myself and chew bubblegum, and I'm all out of bubblegum. So join me and my special guests as we share and learn how to love ourselves fiercely through self-care, explore the wisdom of the harmonic virtues, and grow our conscious community together. By listening, you are now a fierce heart too. Welcome to the Fierce Heart Alliance. Hey Fierce Hearts, this is Summer Sophia Moon. And before we get started with today's topic, I'd like to say thank you to our listeners. You're always welcome here. Thank you to our ancestors, spirit guides, and friends who are assisting us today. May these words be a force for good and timelessly infused in light and held in the frequency of rose quartz and spread healing and peace in the world around us. If there are any words left unsaid, we trust in spirit to make things right and let it gently ease into our consciousness as necessary for understanding in our own time and in our own way for the highest and most benevolent outcomes for all. And so it is. Thank you.
Oh.
Today is our interview episode with for the virtue of rhythm, which is located on the inner levels of the harmonic virtues, which is the metaphysical level, and their foundational elements of consciousness. Virtues are lessons that can impact our everyday life and relationships. They're ever evolving, ever shifting, and developing as we mature. And like a beautiful garden, they require some tending and some management to keep healthy and vibrant. In earlier episodes, we learned about vibration and that everything is energy. Later, we learned that energy is perpetually changing, transforming, transmuting, and alchemizing. The virtue of rhythm is the motion, flow, and cycle and repetition of those virtues, which can be found in the changing of cycles of the seasons, life, sound, music, song, and dance. Today, my guest is Chivito Cowa. Chivito is a traditional rites of passage guide, storyteller, mythologist who shares from direct experience of living with and being initiated into both honored Indigenous and Eastern Yogic lineages. He facilitates Tree of Totems cultural community here in the Pacific Northwest that's devoted to restoring these ancestral practices, knowledge, and ways of gathering that we may grow back a culture that breathes life and inspiration into us. Welcome, Chivito.
Oh, thank you. Honored to be here.
One of the things that has always stuck with me since working with you is that you taught in a certain way that you like to help foster remembering of these teachings rather than trying to teach something, and that it resides within all of us. Could you expand on that?
Absolutely. Yeah. And when we look into and listen into any of these intact cultures from around the world, there's this knowledge that, we're part of the earth streaming. And like my teachers in India, they would call these the original understandings. My elders who mentored me were Hopi and the Dene, Navajo. Here in the Pacific Northwest, they call these the original instructions given to us by Creator. Aborigines call these the original song lines. And it's shared that, this knowledge, these original instructions are, woven into our bone memory. They're a part of us. And when we go out into the wild, when we go into nature or just your backyard, and you become fully present, then you have this experience of remembering. And in Indigenous and these sacred traditions, from the Taoists to local natives, there's this understanding that, we're here to remember our way in. And so we go out into nature, we find these moments to have these spaces, and then we carry back with us what we remember. In contrast to our modern world, we think of accumulating information. And the more information we have, the more power we have over others. But in the original way, it's like when we remember, we're here to bring that medicine back into the world.
That's wonderful. Well, you talked about connecting with Earth and what the virtue of rhythm, how do you recognize rhythm in your life?
Um, Everywhere. Yeah. Um, we really feel into rhythm as the way the earth is praying, and it's praying everything into the world, or you can say it's dreaming it into the world, breathing it. Like, you know, I got to live by a river for some years, and I got to notice how in the mornings the river had contracted and receded, and then during the day it expands, and even during the day it kind of expands and contracts, and so there's a rhythm. And when you become attuned to that, and particularly when I was a raft guide, it became very important to know the rhythms of the river and how the river was going to respond at different times of day. And if we bring that back into our own lives, we see that even within our own day, there's a rhythm with how to move through it. A time we are going to be focused in, and times we're meant to be more quiet. And when we understand those rhythms, and when I understand these rhythms, it's a way of being carried and moving with the what we call the river beneath the river, right? The underlying current of our lives versus us breaking ourselves against the rocks, trying to will ourselves into the way we think we should be. And so rhythms for me have become very important to attune myself to, and in order to maintain a sense of centeredness, I guess, connection to that greater otherness.
And how is song and music meaningful to you? Because I know you work with a lot of different songs and storytelling in your teachings.
Absolutely. Ancestrally, throughout the world, song and music was our way of, again, connecting to what we call that river beneath the river, right? We get to bypass our rational mind. And when we can enter into the spirit of music and rhythm in that way, we get to craft that space within us that what's wanting to find voice inside of us can actually speak and steward us. And there's this knowledge that unless we speak it, unless we dance it, unless we sing it, these things that we can't quite give words to, they get stuck into our body and they begin to contract and calcify inside of us. And like throughout the world, like drumming and dancing and moving on a regular basis, like weekly, it was a way for grief tending. It was a way of retapping into your dreaming, retapping into the power of your ability to dream into the world. And so music has become such an important aspect of maintaining a sense of connection with that deeper rhythm of our own lives and that hidden medicine and power that's inside of us.
That's wonderful. And so the rhythm that's inside of us, can you speak to more about the personal hoop cycle, but then also the hoop cycle, or excuse me, the sacred hoop in general?
Absolutely. What's one of those original understandings is that we're an extension of nature. And so we are a part of nature's rhythm. We're a part of nature's breathing. And we each have a personal hoop cycle, which in Ayurveda we call it the trigunas. And it is this rhythm for people, usually about every month and a half to 2 months, where there is a spirit of we get to expand. And as we expand, we come into new inspiration and creativity. We have clarity of vision. And then there's a period where we like, oh, I have all this vision. Now I want to act on it. And so we begin to act on it and we start to channel that energy. And eventually that energy putters out and we collapse down. So we are descending down into what's called tamas. And that's a time of inertia. And it's a time for being quiet. It's a time for letting all that we just move through. Because as you begin to act on your vision, every day that you're acting, you're part of that conversation with that vision. You're part of moving with that vision, and so you're being changed. And so as you're being changed, then you have to like contract back down, just like the winter expands into summer, and it gives out all these new seeds and all these new bloomings, and then it contracts back down in. Same too, when we contract down, we are helping to germinate the new dreaming seeds inside of us that are ready to take up residency within us, because we've now become ripe enough to grow into that next paradigm of self. And so we have these rhythms, personal rhythms, that are actually happening every month and a half, 2 months. It's different. And during different times of our lives, they might be a little bit longer or shorter, you know? Um, and so, like the seasons, again, there's the contracting time of the winter time. Indigenous cultures, that's like coming into the dreaming den of bear, the cosmic womb. And traditionally, that's when we would gather around the fire as a people, and we would listen into the stories, and we would drum, and we would sing and process all that happened the previous year, and so that it can become useful for us now in order how to be dreamt into the next year. Yeah.
I notice mine with my menstrual cycle.
Mm,
And so I've come to realize that when I'm in my luteal cycle, that's more of Thomas.
mm,
And then the moving from follicular to luteal is the Rajas for me. And
mhm.
then when I finally start with my follicular, I'm just like, I'm at Cypher, let's go. But
Right,
noticing that cycle for me, and like you said, it's about, it's 28, 30 days of a cycle.
right.
And so that ebb and that flow, and to work with it rather than against it, because I would start an exercise routine and I would try and go hard, and then I would peter out, and then I would get hard on myself and
Hmm.
wonder why I can't keep up with this. But really, I just have needed to work with it and recognizing every day, okay, how do I feel like this? Okay, I have the energy, I'm going to do it. And then, if I'm okay, I'm not feeling so energetic, okay, maybe I'll sleep in, okay, maybe I'll just go for a walk, and just recognizing where I'm at every single day. And then if you chart that, seeing,
Mm,
okay, there's this ebb and this flow, this cycle of energy, and needing to rest and restore.
yes, absolutely. Yeah, the thing that most people do is, like, we're so conditioned to be in a state of expanding,
Mm,
supposed to be in a state of affluence. And so we'll get this inspiration to start a new program or a new exercise routine or whatever that is. But eventually we peter out. They're like, wow, what happened to all that motivation? I just failed myself again. And this is self-defeating loop, right?
yeah.
And one of the works that we do, Chivito, is about breaking spells, right? And Martin Shaw, fellow mythologist, he shares, bad storytelling casts spells, right? And so we have all this bad storytelling that we'd be given these stories that we're supposed to be expanding, right? We're always supposed to be in a state of affluence. And he also shares good storytelling, or we might say the original storytelling, breaks spells.
Mm,
And part of that original storytelling is like, hey, we're part of nature. And so there is the coming within time. We often think of expanding and contracting, but really we can think that contracting is really a coming close in time, to come close in with what's now ready to find rest, to find new voice, new creativity, and to allow that, to give yourself that grace. It's such a beautiful thing.
hmm Well, do you have any suggestions, or how can you relate self-care to the virtue of rhythm?
Yes. Self-care, we often think of self-care as this element of, health programs and getting a massage regularly or all these things, and that's all part of it. But really, you might recognize that all of those things we do is really just to help you arrive into a place of presence,
Mm,
to simply rest with where you are right now within the rhythms of life. And if you are able to craft a rhythm, like a mindset of how do you continually connect in within your day throughout all these different rhythms of life, right? When you're, expanding and you're excited to work, or when you're feeling contracted and you're just like, I just need to go into the dark depths of myself. If you find those moments of just being able to be present, I mean, that's really the ultimate self-care. Like all meditations, all these other things are just to help you maintain, to find that rhythm, that one song line that you are a part of. Yeah.
That's part of what the harmonic virtues is about as well, is taking all of these teachings and what is the very basis of what it's trying to teach. And to your point, self-awareness. It's in a
Hmm.
lot of different key aspects of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So like the lineage I'm initiated into in India is called Kashmir Shaivism.
Mm,
And there's a principle called Shiva consciousness. And that has three main principles or qualities to that awareness. And that first awareness is simply to be aware of being aware.
mm,
And we can see all of our modern practices are just trying to help people find that new baseline. Can I be aware of being aware here? And the second principle is once you can be aware of being aware right here, then you can be a co-participant in the theater. Like I'm awake of being in the theater of life. This is the role I'm playing. This is how I'm engaging with the world. You bring intention into that space. And once you can do that, you enter that third state, which is being a co-dreamer. It's recognizing life is a dream. It is a theater. And when you can become aware that suddenly just a single thought is really manifesting, it's shape-shifting your relationship because that's involving what energy you're interacting with the world. So the world is always responding to how and where you are. And so by understanding your own rhythm and being able to craft that space to arrive into a place of presence, then suddenly the world can respond to you from that space. Yeah.
And so, with talking about rhythm and presence and self awareness, what sort of practices could you suggest to help cultivate that?
Yeah, my primary one would be, and it's to recognize, we all live very different lifestyles. We live
Sure.
in different places and so forth. And so rather than creating a routine or practices, it's more about inviting you to like, how can you come into relationship with presence? What does that for you? It might be getting up in the morning to have a cup of coffee where you can just be in stillness and actually greet the day. And so you're like, oh, I am intentionally stepping into this day, right? It could be throughout the day where you're able to just step outside and reground and just see a tree, see a bird and just say, I see you. And just being awoken again into that space. Because as humans, we so easily collapse into a space of momentum. And in our modern life, particularly, like we just build up more and more momentum, and the more velocity in which you live your life, the less you see,
Mm,
the less you can hear, right? And then you're just going through the motions. And then what life is it really there? As Joseph Campbell shared, uh, he says, I don't think people are looking for a meaning for life. He's looking for what people are looking for is an experience of being fully alive.
absolutely. Yeah.
And so the more we can craft that space to our day, just in like, oh, here I am, I'm a part of this experience. That's what's going to breathe life into you. And then you become aware of being a part of what we call your river beneath the river of your life, that underlining current that is stewarding you, and you get to be a conscious participant of it. And you can celebrate it no matter what stage of your cycle you're in. Yeah. So the short answer is just craft those moments for you that allows you to enter a place of presence and connection. And because then it's personal to you. And that's important.
Hmm. Well, back when I was taking one of your trainings, we were at the base of Mount Rainier,
Hmm.
and our task was to sit with the trees. And I had this profound experience with these ancient trees of being witnessed and seen. And I recently moved from an apartment that was essentially a concrete jungle
Mm,
to my home here, where we have a backyard and we have trees. And not expecting that kind of experience, I realized that it had been a long time since I had sat on the earth and communed.
mm,
And so I sat on the earth, and it's instantly just tears of remembering and being welcomed back, and just feeling that weight and that support of her.
yeah,
And then I look at the trees, and I had that vulnerable, naked, just seeing every cell of my body from the trees. And it's that practice of I see you, you see me. And that it's just, I I was so surprised to have that in my backyard and to
Yeah,
know that that is even possible. So that was a really beautiful moment and a reminder that it can be anywhere.
absolutely, absolutely. And we go out into the deep forest in order to be broken open again.
Mm-hmm.
Go out there, and it's important to have that kind of routine. Like, our ancestors, throughout the ages, it was known like, the forest is where we go to remember.
Mm-hmm.
We go to reconnect. And so it's important we go out into the deep forest to break the spells of our velocity and re-arrive in that place of awe and magic and mystery, right? That state of wonder. And but then it's important then when we are back in our everyday life to find those tiny moments to just be present with, whether it's your cup of coffee or the tree outside, right? Or even with the person checking you out at the cashier, not checking you out, but yeah, the
The
cashier
grocery store.
checking you out, at the
Yeah.
grocery, like, can you be present and say, hey, I see you?
Mm,
Because right there, what we're indicating right here is how often we're not actually seen and being seen, even
mm,
while we're amongst everyone. But the sooner I love doing this, particularly in grocery stores, to say, "Hey, I see you." Become really present with someone. It
mm-hmm,
almost shocks them, and then they're like, "Oh," and then they become present, and you can
mm.
see the skin change. You see their energetic field change, and they re-arrive, and you just gifted them the space of returning back into their original authentic being.
It's an invitation.
It is. So the more we can do that with each other, right? It doesn't even have to be a tree, right?
Mm-hmm,
And the more we can do that with each other, that's going to be huge.
mm-hmm. It can be kind of vulnerable as well,
Hmm.
but that can also be a power, a
It's
strength.
definitely vulnerability is the power of authenticity. How much
Mm-hmm.
we're craving and hungering for authenticity, particularly in fellow humans.
Yes.
Yeah.
So often I think people just move through life being superficial.
Hmm.
And that's how I felt for a vast majority of my life. And then when I came into teachings like this and getting into like more of what calls to my heart, that's where the depth comes from.
Absolutely.
And that my cup was just empty
Yeah.
when I started that. And so, yeah, that authenticity, that's real. That's what fills up the cup for sure.
Yeah. And the
Yeah.
reason why so many are on the superficial levels because they don't feel safe.
Right.
They crave authenticity, but they've been, through our experiences in our lifetime, it hasn't been safe to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So we're now in a place where we can break those spells. And when we are saying, hey, I see you, there's no judgment there. They're like, hey, I see you. I'm like, oh, yeah, you're having a hard time. Yeah, I am too.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I
Yeah.
didn't want to wake up this morning or something or whatever it is, but you bring in that authenticity, you give people permission
Mm-hmm.
to honor that which is true to them and it can become beautiful. Yeah.
And it's also a moment for you to honor what's in yourself because I've had this where I've had someone look at me and without even having the spiritual connotation around it, they just saw me and they just have these eyes like, I see you.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh, oh, okay. Yes, okay, okay. See me, see
Yes.
me, you
Yes.
know? Yeah.
In our circles, if you recall, the way we always begin is we do around in our circles, or when we're doing our private sessions, we begin with sharing something we have grief,
Mm,
we have of gratitude, and how much the grief and gratitude have become intertwined, like they're so tied together. But it gives us a space to be seen, right? For that authenticity of the rich textural layers of life that we are actually in.
mhm,
And so often we think we just need to give the gratitude, but there's really no gratitude without the grief.
mhm,
And so, yeah, when we can bring that into just a general conversation, it's magic. That's pure medicine. I call her becoming like an undercover yogi or undercover mystic.
Yeah.
Just out there granting beingness to people and letting them have an experience, and it's beautiful.
Hmm. You talked about getting into nature, and I think that that's one way to recognize the rhythm and the cycles
Mm,
of the seasons and
yeah.
just honor that.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Chivito, do you have any more final thoughts on rhythm?
Um, I think the only thought is an invitation to just pick up a drum,
Hmm.
whether it's a medicine hoop drum or a djembe, whatever it is, and find a rhythm. And, as you begin, you might want to start finding what the rhythm is, the rhythm you want to play. But eventually, as you continue to play, you're going to let that go and see the rhythm that actually wants to come through you.
Hmm.
And that practice alone it's a discipline of being a part of the conversation, right? Versus like, this is what I want to will in. And if you can do this practice of learning how to listen to the rhythm, suddenly you find you begin to do that in your relationships,
Mm.
in the movement of your day, in the movement of your life. And you're like, what is the rhythm of this day, of this moment, this conversation? And you come back into that relational way of being in the world. And when you can do that, then you're part of the rhythm and the energy that is present and alive right now. And you support that. And then you become that hollow bone through which spirit is singing through you.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Chivito.
Yeah. Om, thank you. It's been
Hmm.
awesome.
Well, that's our episode for this week. Feel free to leave any comments you might have about your rhythms to keep the conversation going. Please like and subscribe. It helps this podcast more than you know. And you can follow the Fierce Heart Alliance on Facebook and Instagram for weekly inspiration. Next week is our integration episode for the virtue of vibration. Take care, Fierce Hearts. Till next time.